Asia is a region with no shortage of terrifying tales, but today, as you've probably guessed from the title, we're diving into a chilling theme: school horror stories. Schools are meant to be places of learning and growth, but sometimes they hide something far darker. From the haunted halls of an Indonesian school to the eerie past of a Cambodian classroom and a ritual in India that will send shivers down your spine, these are stories you won't forget. Welcome to Supernatural Secrets. For the first story, we are going to Indonesia, Bandung to be exact. Now, Indonesia is one of those places that's just overflowing with culture, history, and amazing architecture. But here's the thing. Beneath all that beauty lies some truly spine-chilling ghost stories. And today, we're talking about one of the most famous ones, tied to a school of all places. This story revolves around High School 5 in Bandung, a place as beautiful as it is eerie. The school itself is a relic from the Dutch colonial era, with these tall windows and grand staircases. It's the kind of building that feels like it holds secrets. And trust me, it does. Because if you ask anyone about the school, they'll all tell you about one thing: Nancy. So, Nancy's story mostly plays out in two spots: the infamous windows on the second floor and the staircase near the school hall. But first, who is Nancy? According to legend, she was a Dutch woman who met a horrible end, murdered in cold blood, or as some say, heartbroken from a forbidden love. Either way, her death wasn't peaceful, and now her spirit is stuck. The windows are probably what she's most famous for. There are 3 of them on the upper floor that never ever stay closed. Doesn't matter if someone locks them or seals them. By the next morning, they're wide open again. But here's the creepiest part. People say that if you walk around the school building 3 times, Nancy will appear in one of those windows. Imagine looking up and seeing a pale face with hollow eyes staring back at you. Then there's the staircase, where late at night, people have reported seeing her there, standing perfectly still. The description's always the same: long, dark hair, pale skin, and blood dripping from her mouth. There are countless tales of people encountering Nancy out there. But today, we are going to be focusing on one story. One that involves a young janitor who learned the hard way that some warnings are better left unignored. So Arman was new to the school. He'd just been hired to replace Pak Joko, the older janitor who had been there for decades. Pak Joko was set to retire at the end of the school year, and in the weeks leading up to that, he spent his mornings training Arman. Pak Joko would allow Arman to perform the morning shift, and Pak Joko himself would handle the night shifts alone. At first, everything was fine. Arman learned the ropes, how to clean the classrooms, lock up the gates, and keep the grounds tidy. But Pak Joko, for all his quiet demeanor, had a habit of dropping cryptic warnings. "Always finish your work before 10 p.m., he'd say, "and don't linger near the windows at night, especially the ones on the second floor." Arman, young and eager, nodded along, but didn't take it seriously. To him, it just sounded like an old man's superstitions. When the school year ended and the holidays began, Pak Joko officially retired, leaving Arman in charge. His first solo night shift started the evening after the students had left for break. He had the entire school to himself, and with no one around, he figured he could take his time. That night, he decided to start his work later than usual. He thought, why rush? It's not like anyone's here to check on me. So, after having a leisurely dinner, he stepped out of his quarters around 10:30 p.m. and began his rounds. The air was still, the school grounds eerily silent except for the occasional chirping of crickets. Arman started outside, sweeping the pathways and picking up stray pieces of trash. As he worked, he naturally circled the building, not realizing he'd gone around 3 times. On his 4th lap, something caught his eye: the 3 infamous windows on the second floor. Earlier that day, he was sure they'd been closed, but now They were wide open. The curtains billowed slightly, though there was no wind. At first, Armand brushed it off. Maybe the wind blew them open, he thought. But as he stared, he noticed something, a faint movement behind the curtains. It was subtle, like the shifting of a shadow. He squinted, trying to make it out, but it was too dark. Probably just a trick of the light, he told himself, and moved on. He went back inside the building to start cleaning the hallways. The place felt different at night. Creepier, somehow. He ignored it, and decided to start with the staircase near the hall. This was the part of the school Pak Joko had specifically warned him about. Obviously, the warnings came in the cryptic manner that Pak Joko was known for, but for Armand, it all seemed like an old man speaking nonsense. Feeling bold, Armand figured it was just another spot to clean. As he climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. Halfway up, he froze. There it was again. That feeling of being watched. He ignored them and continued cleaning. However, the sense of being watched only increased, and at this point it seemed too intense to ignore. He decided to, slowly, turn and look back down the staircase. What he saw made his blood run cold. Standing at the bottom was a figure, a woman, pale and motionless. Her long, dark hair obscured most of her face, but even in the dim light, Armand could see the faint glint of blood dripping from her mouth, staining her white dress. Her head then suddenly tilted, and though her face was mostly hidden, Armand felt her gaze pierce straight through him. Paralyzed with fear, he couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. The figure began moving, slowly towards him. Armand gathered his strength and quickly ran up and hid in a classroom. After a while, when he noticed that there was no signs of her at all, he didn't stick around to find out if she was still there. He sprinted back to his quarters, locking the door and praying for morning to come. That night, he swore he heard footsteps outside his door, slow, deliberate steps that stopped right out his door before fading away. The next morning, he packed his things and handed in his resignation. He never spoke of that night again. The story became just another part of the legend of Nancy, the ghost of High School 5. All right, let's take a trip to India, specifically to Bijwara in the Tonk district. It's a quiet village, full of life and routine, where people go about their day. Kids head to school, and mornings are usually uneventful. This particular morning seemed no different. The sun was bright, but not too harsh. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, and the students at the upper primary government school had settled into their classrooms. Teachers were busy instructing, flipping through textbooks and jotting down notes on blackboards. Everything was calm, just as it always was. But a few hours into the day, something strange happened. One of the students, a young girl, went to use the restroom. When she didn't return after some time, a teacher went to check and found her unconscious on the floor near the toilets. They managed to wake her up, but she was visibly shaken and unable to explain what had happened. She muttered something about seeing a girl, and she said that someone had tried to push her towards the toilets, but the teachers brushed it off, thinking she might just be unwell. Not long after that, another student, a boy this time, also fainted near the same restroom. He too was found lying there, pale and terrified. When he woke up, he described something eerily similar, a small girl who seemed to want to push him toward the toilets. The teachers were starting to feel uneasy. Was this a coincidence, or could it be something more? The day went on, but the tension hung heavy. Toward the late afternoon, just before school was about to end, it happened again. A third student, another girl, fainted in the same area. That was it. The teachers were now alarmed. They started piecing the incidents together and realized that all three students had fainted near the toilets and reported seeing the same thing. A small girl who seemed to want to push them. The similarities were too much to ignore. By the time the students were sent home, the news had already begun to spread. When the fainted students' parents learned what had happened, they were furious and scared. Soon, other parents got wind of the story, and panic spread through the village. Parents began pulling their children out of school, refusing to let them attend until something was done about the so-called ghost of the small girl. And across the next few days, the school was almost empty, as almost 200 students were absent. The teachers, overwhelmed and confused, decided to talk to the parents. Upon discussing with the parents decided to come together and turn to their spiritual practices for answers to cleanse the school of any evil spirits. It was a big event, and nearly 300 people showed up. The air was thick with the smell of incense, and chants echoed through the school grounds as the villagers prayed for protection. During the ceremony, something unexpected happened. A villager named Gopal Kumar fell into a trance. His voice changed, and he started speaking as though possessed. The villagers believed he was channeling Tahaji, their local deity who was their guardian, protecting the village from harm and unseen dangers. In many Indian communities, it's common to believe that each village has its own deity watching over them, a protector unique to their land and people. For this village, Tahaji was that figure, a brave and noble warrior from folklore, often depicted riding a majestic horse with a spear in hand, ready to shield his devotees from any evil. Through Gopal, Tahaji explained that the spirit haunting the school was of a young girl who had died nearby. She wasn't evil, but she was restless. Tahaji explained that these incidents are happening because the villagers had neglected their bi-monthly pujas at the school temple, which leaves it vulnerable to spirits and other evil beings. Tahaji then instructed them to resume the rituals every 2 months to ensure the school remained safe. The villagers took this advice seriously. They completed the cleansing ceremony and promised to uphold the ritual schedule moving forward. Over the next week, students gradually returned to school. Things went back to normal, or as normal as they could be after such an incident. The school temple became a central part of the community's routine, and every 2 months, without fail, the villagers gathered to perform the puja, and ensuring their children's safety and their peace of mind. For our third and final story, let's journey to Cambodia, a country with a history that's as haunting as it is heartbreaking. It was an ordinary morning in Phnom Penh, the capital city of Cambodia. The air was heavy with the tropical humidity, and the streets were bustling as always. In a quiet corner of the city stood Tuol Sve Prey High School, its classrooms and playgrounds silent. At first glance, it looked like any other school in the city. Until you stepped closer. This was no longer a place for students. In 1976, under the brutal Khmer Rouge regime, the school had been transformed into a secret prison known as S-21. From the outside, it still looked like a school, but the classrooms had been stripped bare, divided into tiny, suffocating cells. Chalkboards were replaced by chains, and the air that once carried the laughter of students now reeked of fear and death. For those of you unfamiliar with the Khmer Rouge, many call it the Holocaust of Cambodia. They believed that Western society had poisoned the country, corrupting its traditions and values. To purify the nation, they sought to erase every trace of modern and Western influence. Their vision was to create a society built entirely on farming and rural life. This meant everyone had to work the land, regardless of their background or skills, living in harsh communal conditions with no room for education, religion, or individuality. It was their way of starting Cambodia over from scratch, but it came at an unimaginable cost. At first, the transformation went unnoticed by the city's residents, but whispers began to spread of people disappearing in the dead of night, families taken without a word. The Khmer Rouge had begun their purge, targeting anyone who represented the old ways. Teachers, doctors, soldiers, artists, even those wearing glasses or speaking a foreign language were branded as enemies of the state, accused of crimes as vague as betraying the revolution. Inside S-21, the days were endless cycles of interrogation and torture. The guards were ruthless, and the prisoners, many of them who were barely adults, faced unspeakable horrors. The regime documented everything. Photographs were taken of each prisoner, sometimes before and after they were tortured. Out of the estimated 14,000 people who passed through S-21, only 7 survived. Just 7. The rest were executed in secret, their bodies dumped in mass graves. When the Vietnamese army finally liberated Phnom Penh in 1979, they found the prison abandoned but intact. Thousands of records, including nearly 6,000 photographs, were left behind. The images became undeniable evidence of the Khmer Rouge atrocities. Today, the school stands as the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, a somber reminder of Cambodia's darkest chapter. For some, the horrors of S-21 didn't leave with the regime. Locals and museum staff often speak of strange occurrences. Whether these are the restless spirits of those who perished or the heavy imprint of history itself, one thing is clear: the echoes of S-21 will not be silenced, and its story remains etched into the very fabric of its walls. That's it for today. These were some of the scariest school horror stories from across Asia, each with its own chilling twist. If you enjoyed these eerie tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Supernatural Secrets for more spine-tingling stories. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and may the mysteries of the supernatural continue to captivate your imagination. This is Supernatural Secrets signing off.